Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about four different types of freedom: time, financial, location, and health freedom. And in that light, I always like to bring people that have different views, bring innovative, interesting views on cutting edge things such as finances, the economy, politics. And so today we have Gene Valentino, and he is actually a serial entrepreneur, but he has a lot of interesting views on, hyperinflation, the market, the government. We're not advocating any sort of ideology here. We're just discussing, what we're seeing and how we can adjust accordingly in these crazy times. So I'll let Gene introduce himself and tell him and welcome him. So, Gene, welcome.
Doctor, thank you very much. This is an honor to be with you. Nice to chat with you just to get an understanding of this scope of what we want to talk about today. Crazy world, crazy times.
It's almost everything is interconnected and one thing affects another. And, you're listening to one thing and, you have war, you have, countries going in. So tell us more about yourself and how you got started.
Well, I thought I was going to be an actor. And in 1973, I did the Stridex medicated pad television commercial. That ended up paying for 4 years of college. I did the United States Navy commercial right after that. I was second choice for John Boy on the Waltons, the old TV series called The Waltons. In fact, Richard Thomas got the part, and he had the same agent I did. I learned rather quickly acting was something I didn't want to do. I finished my degrees at the University of Connecticut, Master's in Business Administration, and a minor in journalism. My dad was a news correspondent at Mutual News Radio Network in New York City. We lived in Connecticut at the time, so at the ripe young age of 16 to 18, I'd take the New Haven Railroad train 2 hours down into Manhattan and do my TV stuff. We were poor. We didn't have much to brag about. My dad, no one gave him a break, and I was the oldest of four children. We had a very well-established work ethic. We believed in the concept of hard work and earning. Your earnings today were to be invested for tomorrow, not spent today, but saved for tomorrow. And that cloudy, rainy day that may be around the corner, you don't hear about, you don't see. And so that was sort of the way I was raised. And I always wanted to get back into television and journalism. And at the end of my life now, at 68 years of age, I find it very interesting that with all the business things I have done and still I am doing, I have one toe in the water with augmented reality and artificial intelligence and this whole new world of social media, and ergo you and me doing a podcast together is sort of the genesis of how my life, I feel, has come full circle. There's so much more to share.
Yeah.
I don't know where you want to begin.
Well, what's interesting is I always I'm a Gen X millennials, but when a lot of people I talk to are, millennials or Gen Z, so they had no idea what, we went through. And I always like talking with individuals such as yourself. You have a lot of experience and knowledge, and you have a lot of experience. So today's going to be talking all about finance and the economy and how politics play. So we'll just start out just big picture, future of America. Just tell us, and then we'll riff off of that.
I'm confident that America has a bright future, although there's good reason to feel the opposite right now. And there's a power in the spirit of the people to want to survive, revive, and step forward to repair and maybe replace some of the wrongdoing that surrounds us. But I think sometimes in the American We have to get our butts kicked a little, and maybe get it, what I would call a generational slap in the face. We made that mistake politically during Vietnam, and look what happened. We find ourselves rebound in generations over social and political issues. The beauty about the American system is it has a mechanism in it, in the democratic republic concept, that it has the ability to self-repair itself without anarchy or autocratic takeover. It seems there's too many fingers in the pie to prevent any one authority or power force from taking over ultimate control of America. And therein lies the stability in the American dollar. Therein lies the stability in the way the world looks at us as a credible partner. And more internally in the States, for most who do not engage in world trade, there is a banking system that has credibility in the world market that the rest of the world looks at, albeit the up and coming rise of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, alternatives to the dollar and the money system as we've known it today. So we are going through a genesis. One of my partners is Peter Diamandis from California. He's very much involved in Abundance 360. He has it annually in the Beverly Hills area, but he's also an entrepreneur. He is, you invited me on as an entrepreneur. He's my model. He's got hundreds of deals going. And in some of them, he is a master at identifying the opportunities that can be engendered in the American system, whether they're domesticated in the United States or working abroad. And I've learned a lot from him. He has a book entitled "The Future is Faster Than You Think." So if you remember the Remington typewriter or the Royal manual typewriter. Now you're Gen X, you may not be have had your hands on that keyboard, but in the early days, typing and being a journalist, you were working literally off a piece of paper, rolling in and typing, not a keyboard or an iPad like we have today. Royal and Smith Corona and others, Remington, literally overnight went bankrupt and out of business because they were not willing to morph into a newer technology of computers and the various types of computers. So the future became faster than you think. Other people scoffed at it, laughed at it, and they went out of business. That's one example. Another example, which I use in my entrepreneur class I teach at the local college, is the Blockbuster going bankrupt to whom? The encroachment of Netflix and other internet media delivery systems. They just were not willing to be elastic enough to flex during the necessary time for change. I remember back in 1984, just got married, didn't have a pot to pee in. I had $20,000 from my wedding with my wife that my wife and I got from our wedding and family. And then I had a house we had just purchased. And there was this new thing at the time. It just came out, 1984, called a line of credit. It was an equity line of credit against the equity in your home. I'll never forget it. So I put together I took 20,000 out of the house, 20,000 out of the savings account. So I had a bucket of $40,000, and the federal government came up with this crazy idea called cellular telephone. Now, when you talk to your friends about it, they'd look at you and say, "A phone the size of a calculator? You must be kidding." It was a lottery process that the federal government was putting together at the time. This is the early to mid 80s. And throughout the nation, the government broke up the country into 5 different blocks. And within each of the blocks, you created a partnership. Well, I was put into this partner without a choice with 19 other people. And And we applied 1,700 times to 1,700 license areas the government had zoned out, if you will, franchise areas, for lack of a better term. And we were in a lottery process. So my family's looking at me. I took the $40,000 from savings in the equity line, and I invested in a lottery process. The craziest damn thing I ever did in my life. The lottery process was no guarantee. You spend it and you don't win the lottery, you lose it. There was no equity. There was no ROI. It was all in and not. You could lose all of it, or you would lose all of it regardless. But the return was a chance. It was a gamble. By the grace of God, on my birthday in 1980, I get a call from the Federal Communications Commission. Mr. Valentino, congratulations. You just won the lottery for RSA number 339 in Central California. I said, great. Where do I cash in my ticket? Oh, no, sir. You don't understand. You have 18 months to build a phone company throughout the Central Valley of California in the design zone of this area. Now, I remind you, I have 19 other partners I never met before. Oh, we got together and we said to each other, while the sharks were forming to take us out, and I said, we met after and we said, hey, guys, we must have something of value, because these sharks over here, the big boys in the game that preceded us by a few years, these sharks already purchased 25% interest of our partnership at like 3 cents on the dollar. These people bailed. And we looked at each other and we said, I don't know you, you don't know me, but there's the enemy. Why don't we figure out how to make it work? And we did. We figured out how to raise the money. We had no more equity in our houses. We were all poor. So and at the time, the banks looked at it as an HLT, a highly leveraged transaction. So they weren't anxious to lend money. We ended up getting a loan from Ericsson Radio Systems for about $12.5 million. And $3.5 million of it was working capital. The balance was to be used to build the towers, the cell sites, the different kinds of towers. And it was really an education for me. My trade was insurance at the time. I had a little insurance agency. The Travelers Insurance Company got behind me and took a chance on me. I had the science through the contractors we hired of learning about cellular towers. And the short story, try not to make it any longer, the short story is the insurance company, Travelers, got behind me. We formed a policy. I wrote the insurance policy called Insuracell, and I went around insuring cellular phone companies all over the country as a targeted niche, just to pay my bills, because we weren't making anything. I was broke. We finally turned it on 7 days before the 18-month deadline. And with just one tower running, within the course of a few years, we had 160 towers of different styles, types throughout the Central Valley of California. Our revenue stream went from $67,000 on the first month. We had no customers. This is just roaming revenue at the time of people coming in. So we 67,000 the first month. Within 2 years, we were at $3.6 million a month in revenue. Sold the company 10 years after we turned it on. That took us up to 1996 for $125 million.
Nice.
So that was the start. I put my little insurance business aside and I said, let me try to retire. That planting tomatoes in the backyard lasted about 7 days. I had to do something. I was too itchy. So we formed Valentino Holdings. And since then, the story gets longer. We got into different technologies, and we just expanded in different areas. I was not married to any one, and that was the key thing. I think I was smart. One thing I'll give myself credit for is you got to be careful not to get too obsessed or married to it. We all have the the ma and pa that had the country store or the deli, and they're great, but boy, every one of them has a lifeline to them, and you must be aware to know when it's in time to leave, or whether you hold on to it forever and pass it on to your grandchildren.
Yeah, it's so you said so many interesting things. I'm a big fan of Peter Diamandis too, and his 8360 and his book as well, and really the power of technology. And it seems like these days the United States is kind of the best of the worst. So you see, it's kind of every country is in the same situation: excessive debt, inflation, central bank, you can name it. And then it's going to be technology and it's going to be the intersection of culture, technology, media, and finance that's going to sort of progress and move us into the next era. So the other thing that you mentioned was that, which is really interesting, is that I've studied the decline of civilizations all the way, Rome, then England, and then that's how the United States become the world superpower was in the 40s after World War II, and Europe was decimated. And then now we have, China and India, Russia. We have countries trying to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. And, so there's this whole geo plan that's, playing out. We don't know what's going to be the eventual outcome, but you have some interesting ideas, which is really interesting. I know a lot of people would be interested in learning more about you. I know you've been photographed with Newt Gingrich and a lot of prominent politicians. So how can people follow you, contact you, or visit your website?
Well, for the purposes of this conversation, I'll stay away from the politics of it all, but you can go to www, as it says on the screen. You'll find economic opportunities there. And yeah, you'll get a taste of my history and my background. I'm not in politics now because I tell you the way it is. And that's not always, I'm a lousy politician, I guess, which is maybe a good thing. I'll tell it to you the way it is. I'm a truthful and honest person. I've made my money honestly. And as I've said in my website, I've probably left money on the table, but I slept well at night, staying on the high road and not compromising my ethics or my standards. It was too easy in politics to do that. And we must make a course correction as a nation, as a world, to be more authentic in our opinions and do things that are ethical and work towards a greater good. There's an old saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And I think some of the folks, not just, America is very self-deprecating. That's probably why it's the longest lasting, as hard as we are on us and as hard as the rest of the world is to criticize us. We are the longest standing governance in the world. That isn't just of luck. It's because we've had a system in place that self-checks itself, which is what I was referring to in the beginning. And we brag on our riches, and we are brought before the firing line when we've made our mistakes. And so I think the pendulum in government swings from one extreme to another. When I was a local county commissioner, I noticed that in the county I was elected, I was one of 5 county commissioners that served. There's 5 positions in the county between 2006 and 2014. And during that time, you could watch the power and influence of the county commissioner really grow. So the pendulum swung one way where we thought our you-know-what didn't stink and that we were pretty powerful. But there was a self-correction that went on, and the pendulum swung back the other way. In the middle was okay. It was a collaborative relationship with the administrative team of the county. But then the administration started getting too powerful and quashing the influence or authority vested in the commissioner. And as a result, these administrator types got pinched. So I think the whole concept of our democracy on a broad basis is that there's a built-in tension, doctor, that kind of is a constant give and take that occurs for self-correction. It's almost like tidal exchange in the ocean. Whereas other autocratic forms of government, Marxist or communist forms of government, end up being so scaled at the top with power that there's an eventual collapse. Now, that's what I think we've seen in most nations of the world at different times. But for some reason, by the grace of God, the United States has been a stabilizing influence. Admittedly, right now, it doesn't look that way. We are to blame for that. We reap what we sowed. And, the thing with a democracy is we voted in who we wanted. And we may sometimes regret who we voted for. That's what we're taking a look at right now, I guess.
Yeah.
But in this environment, it's the most stable you to consider investment strategies relative to other areas of the world where you have a great idea to bring to a foreign country. But what I might take for granted is if I was to do something in the Central America or South African country, is the stability of the government itself. Mm-hmm. So while I think I've got a good contract in place to grow a business idea as an entrepreneur, the government may come in with a new regime and say, the heck with your contract. We don't give two hoots about it. It has no standing with us. And therein goes your millions of dollars you invested. And that's the peril that you run up against. The way it's been mitigated many, many times, many places, is through a World Bank system, through letters of credit or standby letters of credit that work as sort of a bond or a guarantee that the performance will be protected, the performance will occur, that the targets will be achieved under a performance guideline, and the failure to perform is collateralized against some sort of bond instrument. That's how they've been working it in the world market. There's always a guarantee behind the contract overseas, instability of the governing entity.
Yeah, interesting. This has been a fascinating discussion, and for all the listeners and audience, please check out Gene's website and resources. He has a wealth of knowledge and information and experience. So thanks so much, and we'll look forward to hearing about your future success.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.